Thank you for joining us for our Global Business Collaboration Pledge With Us webinar series. I'm Robyn Vernon-Harcourt. I'm the Director of the Global Business Collaboration, and it's such a pleasure to be with you, all of you here today. Do drop a hello into the chat. Let us know where you're joining from today, which organisation. We'd love to say hello. And as people are joining us, I'm just going to run through some quick housekeeping to make the most of our time that we have in this session together. So as this is a webinar, your video and audio won't be shown, but you really can engage with us and our brilliant speakers via the chat function. So we really encourage you to do that, and I can see people saying hello now, which is really lovely to meet you all. We appreciate that we've got people joining us from around the world, so we do encourage you, if you would like to use closed captions. That can be found at the bottom of your screen, and once you click the CC icon, you have the ability to change the language that the captions come in if you would like to. We are so delighted to have two of the founding partners of the Global Business Collaboration with us today, Deloitte and Viva, and our panel discussion is focusing on how can we as businesses and organisations empower our people to prioritise and manage their mental health and also support one another. We know that as organisations are working to take positive steps to really create environments that support our people's mental health and well-being, as well as putting in place some policies, practices, activities, there's also a need for often a culture shift or a behaviour shift where employees are really empowered to take charge and prioritise and manage their mental health. And organisations need to be really proactive in encouraging this. It won't necessarily happen on its own, which can come as a bit of a surprise when you're pushing in place lots of great tools and support. And it's a really strong foundation to build your wider strategy on. But of course, we know it's not easy. It can be challenging to know where to start. What do we mean by empowerment? How do we reach different groups and different people across your organisation? And there isn't really one way or one approach of doing this. And that's why we're delighted to have our two speakers with us today. We have Iman Gibson, Global Wellbeing Director at Visa, and Tim Ackroyd, Global Talent Senior Manager for Mental Health at Deloitte. And they are going to share their experiences of doing just this in their organisation. And they have such a wealth of expertise, experience to share. So we are so delighted to have them and really looking forward to making the most of our time together. Before we dive in to our conversation, I want to make sure we've got as much time as possible to hear from Tim and Iman. But before we do, I wanted to give a very short overview of the Global Business Collaboration for Better Workplace Mental Health, or GBC for short, for those of you who may be new to our community. And our mission at GBC is really to bring together a global community of visionary leaders and organisations, both to advocate for, but also to accelerate positive action on workplace mental health. And the GBC was founded by 9 founding partners who you can see on the slide. And a key part of our work in driving this change is with our leadership pledge. And we ask the most senior leader in your business or your organisation to commit to prioritising positive action on workplace mental health in every territory that you're operating in, if you're a global or international business, and delivering these 6 commitments of the pledge, which you can see on the screen. So why is this important? It's important because we know having senior leadership buy-in is really critical to this agenda, and making that commitment both internally and externally is really demonstrating to your people that you're taking this seriously and holds the leadership to account. And we also know that if a business is putting in place policies and practices to progress these 6 areas, they'll really be making tangible and sustainable difference about how their organisation is both thinking but also acting on mental health. So we are delighted that we know lots of you here with us today are signatories, and this webinar is focusing on our fourth commitment of that pledge. But for those of you who aren't yet part of our community, this webinar is still very practical and relevant for all of us working in workplace mental health and wellbeing. And we would, of course, encourage you to join us, and the team will be putting in some information to help you reach out to us afterwards if you'd like to discuss that further. Brilliant. So with that introduction out of the way, I'm really excited to dive in. Iman, Tim, thank you so much for being here with us today. So I think a great place to start is understanding a bit about both of your organisation's overall approaches to mental health and wellbeing. Why is this a global priority for your organisations, and how does the empowerment of your people play a part in that strategy, and what do we mean by that? So, Iman, if I come to you first on this, can you share a bit more about Visa's approach on mental health and wellbeing, and how does empowerment feature within that? Well, Iman, it looks like we've just lost your sound. It was working perfectly earlier, I know.
How about now, Robyn?
Yes, we can hear you now. Brilliant.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Very clear.
Okay, wonderful. Headsets sometimes fail us, I guess. So, I think first I have to start with why this is important to me. So I've been meditating for about 25 years. I learned meditation and yoga when I was 11 years old. I had the great privilege to do that at that time, which was quite rare. And realizing that, that caused a whole ripple effect of being empowered to take care of myself and seeing how much I was able to accomplish and to do and to see in the world from that place. And so part of what I did when I created Visa's Wellbeing organization and from the grassroots stage was really to see how we could provide that to everyone and to each and every one of our employees to learn how to calm our minds, to see things more clearly, to be empowered to thrive in our lives. And so our approach is not so much on like the, hey, we're going to give some benefits to folks and kind of let them be. Our approach is really around, working with understanding where employees are, listening to their needs, hearing their challenges, and then making decisions to support them based on that kind of versus what our goals are as an organization. Our motto is to care for the whole unique you. It's to have a globally unified approach, but that's tailored to really reflect all of the diverse people and the diverse needs that employees have across all of our regions. And that's, you think about countries like Dubai to the US to, the UK, like there's such a wide variety of experiences that we're having. If you think about the socioeconomic climate in some of the countries in Latin America, our needs are really, really vast when you talk about, and so I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we really tailor our offerings to that. We have 4 pillars, which are similar to what many companies have. We have emotional, physical, financial, and then this year we've actually taken a slightly different approach to overlay social throughout all of those, as we think that social connection and making sure that we're delivering our content, our information, our resources in a way that brings employees together, especially in this post-pandemic world, is at the center of our approach. So yeah, thanks for the question, Robyn.
That's great, Iman. Thank you. That's such a helpful context to set in to sort of dive into the details about how you do some of that. And I love hearing about your personal experience as well, and definitely an early adopter of meditation and mindfulness. So that's very inspiring and a good reminder for all of us. Thank you. And Tim, following on from what Iman has shared, how about at Deloitte? How does, I guess, empowerment feature in your approach, and how has Deloitte approaching mental health and wellbeing across the business?
Well, thanks, Robyn. Yeah, so maybe I'll start with a bit of context. We're an organisation of over 400,000 people across more than 160 countries. And really, it's those people who deliver services to our clients in tax, audit and assurance, risk advisory, consulting and financial advisory. We're not a factory assembling products here, essentially. Our people are experts in their fields. They use their minds, their hard work, their knowledge and skills to deliver the services. So if it's our people who ultimately power everything we do, then we can't really expect our people to have a meaningful impact if they're not thriving, being at their best, or experiencing poor mental health. So that's why, from a global focus perspective for us, like, mental health is a very deliberate choice. We're also in a position where we've conducted a lot of various pieces of external research, so gathering insights from workers outside Deloitte across the globe. We've seen things like the high levels of stress and anxiety in Gen Z and millennials around the world. We see women leaving their roles due to challenges of burnout that they face. And also, we more recently seeing barriers that the design of work and ways of working can create for people who aspire to be well at work. And obviously, we are not immune to these challenges, and we continue to address them ourselves within our walls as well, with our clients as well. But in terms of empowerment, I was thinking about this, like, empowerment in the context of health. I think it is an incredibly powerful tool. I'd argue perhaps even fundamental and critical. I'd go as far as to imagine, like, I can't really imagine a mental health strategy that having impact without a focus on empowerment, honestly, because it's one thing to, and Iman touched on this, it's one thing to offer benefits and EAPs, events, and programs to everyone. But without empowerment, how are they actually going to use those and apply those once they get back to their desks? And that's really sort of what our global approach has been working on. It's focused a lot on this. It's thinking about how we equip people with the awareness and knowledge, build their confidence and skills, but also we want to remove barriers. We want to stop them, we want to remove the barriers that stop them using those skills. And we want to challenge the norms and really think about how we're working and addressing stigma. We strive to make it as easy as possible for people to prioritize themselves and support others. And that's where a lot of sort of role modeling and focus on this comes through.
Thanks, Tim. That's brilliant. I love how you shared around building confidence skills, but then also removing the barriers so people can use the skills and the confidence that they're building. Really, really interesting. And as you said, our people are our core of our organisation. So being able to support them and prioritise their health is good. It's good for us. It's good for business. So that's brilliant. And this is a big ask from, thinking through actually how do we do this? We've seen how important it is. I love the real focus both your organisations have on empowerment and how important it is. I think that's come across really clearly. How do we actually go about doing it? And Tim, I know Deloitte have delivered a range of campaigns and initiatives focused specifically on empowering people across your business to support their mental health and well-being. And I guess, as you said, also really creates a culture that fosters that as well, so creating that longer term change. One of those I know is your What's Really on Your Mind campaign, which is brilliant and I love. Could you tell us a bit more about that and some of your learnings from it as well to help all of us?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like many wellbeing and inclusion practitioners at times can tend to dread campaigns. I mean, it's something that I certainly felt over the years, that the awareness days that come around, the pressure to create something new every time. I don't know about you, Iman, but they keep coming from my perspective. There's a lot that we want to say. There's a lot we want our people to do. So knowing where to focus is always the challenge. And try not to do everything at once. I think it'd be a real tricky balance, but really critical. My experience is really, when prioritizing the campaign, is thinking about making sure that it's well received. I want it to come across as clear. I want it to come across confidently. And I think number one is being human, honestly, particularly in this space. But the challenge is that we've got a myriad of messages being chucked at us as employees. We've got leaders who have got a lot of expectations on to send things out, and it can get really busy in our own roles. At times it's like drinking from a fire hose in some organizations, and we've got to really think through that. Honestly, the solution, from our perspective, which we continue to work on, is, we often start from a perspective of thinking very carefully and deliberately about one specific behavior we want to empower at a time, or one barrier we want to challenge. The focus comes around that, and we're really building everything around that objective. So we start very simply and deliberately. And that was really like what what Really On Your Mind campaign came from, which we put together last year, actually. We'd seen some research, I don't know if others had seen this in the call, but the average adult will respond, "I'm fine," when asked how they are, on average 14 times a day. And essentially, but 78% would say, "I'm fine," even if they were struggling. So we wanted to put together, we wanted to empower our leaders to ask this important question, but we also wanted them to really mean it and to listen. And we wanted our people to feel they could answer openly and honestly, without fear of repercussion. And this really tied together in terms of what we were trying to do across the whole strategy as well. So as you can see on the screen here, this is what we came up with. A bit of a play, something we're particularly very honest, sort of like asking the question, like, if you're asking what's really on your mind, answering honestly. And these are some typical scenarios that we were hearing around the organization. And it was nice to see it being picked up. It was certainly, these playfully designed cartoons, these typical conversations. We offered a lot of tools around that as well. We linked to our conversation guides. It linked to our stories of lived experience stories from colleagues. And it was our leaders that were amplifying this. And what was really nice to see our people pick this up. It's about empowerment. We're empowering our leaders to use this. This isn't like a central message sent out. This is sent out from our CEOs, our business leaders. And honestly, it worked very well, almost to the point where it's still, we still see it being used in the organization as well. And I think the point here is also about measurement of impact as well. So really pleased to see last year we saw an 11 percentage point increase in confidence of our people to speak to their leader about their mental health. And I'll talk a bit about that later. It wasn't just from this campaign, but that's the collaboration consisted of lots of different initiatives being focused on one clear objective that we wanted here. So, and really, honestly, the learning from this, was saying simple and clear objective was the key. It was empowering our leaders to use this material, not coming from HR when spent out. And being able to measure it, being able to see what the impact was. And as an aside, honestly, like if you work in Deloitte and you know our brand, being able to do this was actually quite fun, because it can be quite sort of, you have the Deloitte look, and we're actually able to play with it sort of a little bit for the fun for our people as well. So yeah, it was good fun, this one.
Yeah, I love it, Tim, and I love what you're saying around the sort of simplicity and being really focused on not trying to do too much time, and actually how something like this can be used throughout the year. I think Sharon has said in the chat, as you were both saying, that awareness days are good, but those efforts really need to be sustained throughout the year, and something like this is really being kind of carried through.
That's a real challenge, isn't it? Because I'm actually, we do a lot of campaigns, but honestly, like I'm with that. Like we need to be. This is a message that needs to be repeated. It needs to be constant, throughout the year, I think. And if we rely on campaigns too much, then actually we can miss the point, I think, honestly.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it can provide a hook to then signpost to that support and to that sort of skills and confidence building. And I mean, brilliant in terms of measuring that as well, Tim. That's a challenge. Well, we'll come back and pick your brains on that in a bit more detail, so you can share with us how we can all do that as well. And Iman as well. I know that Visa is taking a really innovative approach to empowering your people. And can you share with us some of the sort of campaigns, activities, initiatives that you've delivered, and what impact you've seen from those?
Yeah, sure, Robyn. I think, I love, and can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. The headsets are working again. Never know with those things. So I love what Tim shared. It's so simple and so clear and so playful. I think sometimes in a work context, we're so serious. And sometimes what I noticed is when we've had talks and we say like World Mental Health Day, the attendance as compared to some of our regular monthly talks, like goes down dramatically, because folks are like, dang, I have already all of this stuff to do. Now I've got to think about my mental health in the middle of my day. That feels overwhelming. So I think taking a step back and recontextualizing it, making it playful, focusing on what the outcome is that we want employees to get away from it is really, really important. That's what I love about what Tim, you shared. And I wish I could just like play that cartoon at Visa for all the employees in the next October 10th. But yeah, I think, we've done a couple of different approaches. The first year we started with a Stop, Pause, Breathe campaign. It was really simple. We just had like signage everywhere. that said stop, pause, breathe, and just encourage folks to take a moment for themselves. And it's really simple, but it's important because and to keep it simple, I think to the point of what Tim shared and you echoed, Robyn, because there's so much information there. And I think we have some years tried approaches where we've done just so much. And if employees didn't catch one of those, they almost felt more stressed because they had the fear of missing out. I will say around the time of return to office, I love the campaign we did because we kind of placed these prompts in physical spaces around the offices and digitally, where we shared messages that kind of encouraged employees to take care of their well-being in different ways. So we had kind of open-ended prompts like blank would bring me joy today. I will check on somebody today by blank. I am grateful for blank. I will care for myself by doing blank today. And we encouraged employees to, talk about those with their peers, their teams, their ERGs, to ask folks around the lunch tables. We had them in the cafes as well, how they were doing them, and it kind of became a topic of conversation. In some offices, they stayed up for several months. So to the point of the person on the chat who was saying, "Hey, this shouldn't just be for the day." We do think it's definitely important to have that definitely spill over these days. Mental Health Awareness Month, World Mental Health Day, those are great opportunities to kind of start and catalyze a conversation, especially in organizations where there is more stigma. And then there can be like spillover effects of that. And then you can actually empower employees to organically ask for more, which is really nice. This year, we kind of dialed in on being a lot more in person and focusing more on that social aspect that I mentioned. So in addition to having really expert-led talks, workshops for groups that we'd heard from were struggling right now, like parents, folks who are struggling with emotional resiliency, we really also hosted in-person breathe, stretch, meditate sessions and pop-ups at different offices where we provided opportunities for employees to really decompress together and have support with their colleagues, their managers, their teams. And we did like 17 of those pop-ups at different offices. And then we did virtual pop-ups in each region and gave employees a chance to really talk with each other, see each other, and have that interaction. And it's nice because we've seen that spill over through our regular cadence of sessions and talks and interactions over the months following, where employees feel more comfortable being more vulnerable, where they are more open. They're doing some of these activities. I'll talk about this a little bit later with their teams.
Yeah, I love that, Mom, and I love you said playful and what's going to bring you joy. And I think often we think around sort of mental health and well-being as a sort of reactive if we're not feeling that well or if we're having challenges. Whereas I love that focus as well on actually, proactively helping us build good mental health by focusing on, play, joy, giving, those five ways to well-being. I really love that, and that sort of simple approach as well that can be adopted and then sort of like you said, carried through the year through teams and different business units using that. So that's really interesting. Thank you so much. And you touched all this already in your answer, saying how you focused on different groups that you knew were struggling, like parents. But I agree. We've seen research as well. We've delivered research at my board as well around kind of parents and carers and the impact on their mental health. And we've spoken about this a lot, yourself and Tim and I, around that we can't have well-being without inclusion. So I'd love to just dive into that a little bit more with you and just understand how does inclusion factor when you're empowering people across Visa. And can you share some examples, because we know that this isn't easy. So you've touched on one already, but if you could expand on that, that would be brilliant.
Absolutely. I'm very passionate about inclusion. I think that inclusion doesn't just mean, what you see at face value, right? Like I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman. That's pretty obvious. There's so much else about me, and there's so much else about each of us that we have that isn't always seen or that we can't always bring to the workplace, right? And so inclusion, when we think about neurodiversity, when we think about someone's role, right, in their lives as a parent, as a caregiver, as a friend, someone who may learn differently. I think someone who is introverted versus extroverted, someone who's a highly sensitive person. So thinking about inclusion from that lens and really zooming out and understanding when I develop programs, when I come up with toolkits, am I really creating them in a way that supports each of those different populations and kind of being thoughtful about that as we kind of vet what we're creating. That's kind of the first step I would start with. And then we actually create a lot of resources specifically for diverse groups. So right now I'm really, really excited about a guide I'm writing for parents and carers. We have a new parents and carers ERG. And so to pull from the momentum of that, I'm hearing, like I said, our approach is really to hear the need and then to support the need. So we hear the need that parents and carers are struggling. And oftentimes resources for parents and carers are, here's how you can take care of your child better. Here's more that you can do for someone else. And then it's like, who's thinking about me, right? And so creating and putting in some of those resources around how can I be mindful as a parent who has actually less time. When I hear make a self-care plan, that may feel like another thing I have to do on my to-do list. That just feels really overwhelming. How can I have compassion for myself and use some of the, the Kristen Neff exercises, or the Tara Brach RAIN practices, the RAIN of self-compassion, or inner critic, which some of the parents we've heard at Visa feel I'm not doing enough at work or at home or anywhere. So giving them exercises to reframe, and then so then they can take that, and we'll talk a bit more about like bite-sized tools and resources. They can take these kind of quick activities into their ERGs, into their groups, and say, okay, here's an activity we can do today to kind of reframe our experience as parents or as carers, or that I can do on my own to really improve my quality of life and my quality of ability to work. And so we've done that through toolkits. We've called them care guides or self-care guides. And we've even down to we've tailored them even down to the way that they're framed. So for example, we've created some for AAPI groups in the US when there are issues with AAPI, discrimination and hate against AAPI folks. And so in those communities, folks don't really think of self-care as much as community care. So we called that a care guide. But then for other groups, we may have called it a self-care guide. So we're really thoughtful with our language, with the tools that are included, with the amount of time that's dedicated to each thing, in the way that all of our resources are developed. We also have safe spaces sessions for diverse groups when issues arise and they're needed, like for parents, like for Black employees when everything was happening here in the US as well, when COVID was surging in India in ways that were really challenging for folks who were away or there. We also make sure, of course, all of our vendors prioritize diversity across all the dimensions that we talked about, especially the ones that are unseen. And then when we think about speakers, we really ensure that, so let me take a step back. The way we handle speakers, we do a speaker session about every month or every other month around topics that employees are struggling with, that they need more support on. And so we actually have the same topic for 1 month, but different speakers on the same topic, so that employees, maybe an AP, can talk about suicide in a way that really speaks to them and the challenges that they're having there, or that they can get an expert that speaks more from an expert and an authority perspective versus sharing personal experiences like someone may like in the US or UK a little bit more. So really briefing all of our experts on the cultural norms of the region, the cultural norms of that office, down to science, personal examples. And then this year, for the following year, we're going to start actually creating unique programming in each region for some areas where the cultural nuances do not have overlap, and so that they can have content in their local language, and also that supports any cultural differences. So yeah, really, really passionate about that. I could talk about it forever, but I'll pause there.
I wish we could. I wish we had more than an hour, because absolutely fascinating, and I'd love to continue on that. And I think your approach that you've shared is brilliant, and so much within that as well, sort of tailoring it to different groups, listening through your ERGs, different employee groups to really understand what the need is to then support you to develop that support, and really rooting that in the need of that group, thinking through the language. I love that difference between community care and sort of self-care. I think that's really powerful, and making sure that it's culturally appropriate and relevant, having different speakers. I think that's very intentional, and not always easy to do as well when you're managing a big program. So yeah, well done. And I think Rachel had said in the chat around caregiving extended to aging parents and family members who are unwell, and of course there's so many different challenges and aspects of different people's lives, as you were saying, Iman, that we don't necessarily see when we just see people on a screen or in person. So Really important. Thank you for that. So building on that, Tim, so we've seen inclusion as very, very important, but we know that it can be challenging, as Iman was saying, around how we tailor support in our approaches, particularly around empowerment when we're thinking through the different markets and cultures that you have across the workforce. And of course, as Deloitte, as a large global firm, this will be something that I'm sure you have been grappling with and delivering on. So it would be great just to hear, a bit more about how Deloitte are developing your global approach, but then also how you're embedding that across all the sort of territories and countries you work in, and how you had to adapt that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably important to start with saying, Iman and I've talked about this, the differences between our organizations they're quite big, so in some places, so Deloitte is an organization made up of many firms, partnerships. I sit in a global role, but it's not like I sit here and tell all the countries what they need to do. It's a collaboration. I work with some really experienced wellbeing leaders and inclusion leaders, talent leaders across the world. So it's this isn't in our setup. It's not about global telling people what to do. But I think that yes, to your point, it comes with challenges. But actually, I think some of those challenges make us in a place where we can actually have some increased impact, because that local context, as Iman was talking about, and tailoring is incredibly important. It's necessary. And actually, when I think about it from a mental health perspective, the importance of local context is even more heightened. We can't assume what works in one country works in another. And so, what works in one country won't work elsewhere. The local leaders essentially know their firms, they know their people and their culture, and what works well. And so really we're working with them to do that. Having said that, we want to collaborate globally. We want to be all pointing in the same direction to achieve a common goal. And also not all countries will be and regions and firms will start at the same place. And that is one of the things that we've done in our with global, I suppose, with our global strategy, is to bring everyone to a foundational level where we can be sure that there is support in place and there's a minimum of what to build upon. The last challenge I actually want to talk to you, though, is about not just making this an HR or talent priority. And I'm really passionate about this. This needs to be a business imperative. And we need to build what we're doing into the day-to-day. We need to establish how to do that, and we need to establish the right priorities and the right business objectives. So what we've done, let me get to that now. So I'm trying not to make this sound really kind of compliance and boring, okay? It's what works for one organization may not work for another. For us, in terms of Deloitte, we all our CEOs, around the world have signed up. They signed up to something called our global mental health baseline. Okay, that baseline was embedded in a long-established assessment process across all Deloitte firms that commit each year to doing this in terms of high quality, reducing risk, and improving performance standards. Okay, so this is a business process. Okay, and what we've done is we've taken a mental health baseline and embedded it in a business standards that all countries need to sign up for. So we didn't just say, there you go, you need to meet these standards. And to give you an idea of those standards, there were 4 elements to this. So firstly, it was about leadership, education, and awareness. So all leaders needed to have a deeper understanding of why mental health is important for our business, for our organization success. The second one was a concerted focus on reducing stigma. So through the CEOs and business leaders having a voice around mental health and storytelling. Third one was around support information. So making sure that all member firms, all Deloitte firms had, no matter where you were, you had access to quality support information. And then lastly, about evaluating and identifying causes of poor mental health. So leveraging data and feedback from our people to identify where the sources of stress might be. Okay, so you can imagine all these CEOs, they have signed up to meet these standards. Our global team then supports them over the course of 18 months. And I'm really proud and pleased to see that after 18 months, all 160 countries, all the Deloitte member firms had reached this standard. And we saw the impact of that. So some of the outcomes, taking it out of talent and into the business process. I talked earlier about 11 percentage points increase in the confidence of people to speak to their leaders. We saw 10% percentage point increase in terms of confidence that Deloitte would support them. We saw other business metrics that showed that sort of taking this into the day-to-day made a big difference. So I know that's but I'm very passionate about this. We can't just speak about well-being and mental health within HR, within a benefits, wherever it sits. It's breaking it out, and that's what our global approach has done, and we've really seen the impact of that.
Yeah, I love that, Tim. It's through every day, isn't it? It's not something that we, just do once a year and then think, oh, great, we're good for the rest of the year, whether that's from an individual perspective or an organizational perspective. So I really love how that's been embedded through all of your member firms and the structure that you've set up, that it's led by, local leaders with support and, consistency across.
Yeah, and it does play to empowerment, and we talk about empowering our people to look after themselves, our empowering our leaders to look out for others. We're empowering communities, firms to make this a priority. So it's all part of people being able to have the autonomy to do it themselves and do it in the right way that sees fit, I think.
Yeah, and that autonomy is so important. We know that in every aspect of our working life, that's a real driver of well-being. So, it makes sense that that's exactly the same when we're talking about well-being and mental health as well. So, sort of delivering that at an organizational level. And Tim, you touched on this really nicely there around the importance of involving leaders and managers in this approach. And I guess the question is, we know why this is important, but from your perspective, what role can leaders and managers play in supporting their teams to prioritise their well-being, and why is it so important to engage leaders, and how do we do that?
Yeah. And honestly, I think many organizations, I'd be curious if it's the same for them, but within an organization like ours, team leaders, we're setting up new teams every day for different client engagements, different projects, and the team leader and the leaders in that, really set that environment, that culture. They set the direction, so they have a real pivotal role. It's a lot of pressure on them, yes, of course, but it's also, it's a really important role, and actually involving them in this discussion is going to be critical for an organization like us. So there's no way we can do it without, I think. And we're very fortunate here at Deloitte. We're a very large, privileged organization with lots of resources, and we do have a very clear focus on leadership. So we've been focusing on those capabilities for a long time, but also role modeling. We're really emphasizing that we've been encouraging, empowering leaders to speak about their experiences of mental health, all forms of experience of that, and one of our shared values is we talk about leading with integrity, and that's part of that as well. But also the leaders give us real deep insight into what it's like actually on the ground, and there's a lot of listening from us, from our teams to listen to what it's like on the ground, as well as balancing that with the team member feedback as well. So there's a lot we need to base this a lot around the leadership piece. But I know that everyone here is going to sort of think about solutions, and I'm very aware when I talk about this, with lots of resources here we've drawn on, and I don't necessarily think that we need, you need to have all the resources and money to be able to put these things together. But I think there's a whole spectrum you can do. I'll talk about what we've done. So we've focused on training. Okay, so there's a lot of training. We talk about we have a global e-learning focused on supporting mental health at work, which we released last year. It's, I think a lot of organizations might have used this, where they talk about the frameworks, but have conversations. But we've also really focused that in terms of the environment that the leader creates. What is it about work that makes it engaging, good for your health and well-being? Thinking about how you can shape that, and making sure that that's right in place. We've also had a lot of fun with developing some immersive learning. So we've actually had these point of view films. We've done it across inclusion, but it's what's it like in certain situations for certain people, certain groups. For them, we had one on someone having a panic attack in the middle of a client brief. And it's from the point of view of that perspective, so leaders can understand, what it might be like, so build the empathy there. We've done a lot of work around role modeling and so global stories, leaders around the world talking about their own experiences of mental health, normalizing that conversation. it was important for leaders to set that tone and to say, I've had this experience, and I hope it empowers others to also talk about that. So there's no, you know, not have the negative repercussions of lived experience and sharing. I think there's been, you know, really, it's been amazing to see that around the world. And also, yeah, I talked a bit about the support tools, you know, so embedding in the day-to-day, you know, how you have that conversation, what resources are available, making that information readily available in the flow of work has been a big focus for us. Because yes, it can't sit somewhere and you hope people go to it. In terms of empowerment, it needs to be there. The barriers need to be removed to use it. It needs to seem to be common to use it and apply them. And yeah, we're definitely on a journey here, as everyone is, I think. You know, we're learning as we go. But again, some of the metrics we're tracking, we're seeing that improvement. And yeah, the leader plays that incredible, important role. But we need to make sure they're looked after too, because they are also people and they are also going to be need to look after their mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that in terms of role modeling, sharing experiences. I think also role modeling of help-seeking behavior is really important. I think that's something we think we probably have naturally, but actually I think it's a skill. And, you know, I love the sort of holistic approach you're taking with leaders and managers. And we know that they're time poor, so making it really easy to access so they're not having to, you know, search for it, and it's just part of their day-to-day is so important as well. And Iman, I know you wanted to jump on this as well, and I think you know, Tim shared it at the end. We know that, you know, managers are so important in setting the culture, setting the tone, supporting their team's mental health. But also we know that we need to protect their mental health because they're often in that position where they get pressure from above and below. So I'd love to understand a bit more about how you've been approaching this at Visa.
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to call out, I know Tim mentioned a lot about data and how it's important to just inform the population and also leaders. We actually have a pulse survey that we ask well-being questions within. And so one of those questions over the past several years has been, I'm effectively able to switch off from work at the end of the day. Another question is, my manager cares about my well-being, and that Visa, the same question around how Visa cares about my well-being. And those questions have been really important to help us just find areas of challenge within the organization. So we can have a filter by team, by leader, by organization, by region, by function. And so we're able to really look at that data and say, and it's just kind of part of our general pulse survey data. One, it does a couple of things. One, it really normalizes that, hey, well-being is a business imperative, and you can show that a lot more than you say it, right? You can say it all you want, but then when you actually put that into the survey data, the primary survey that goes out across the entire organization, not like a well-being survey, that really sends that message more clearly. And then when that's wrapped into the processes of leaders being able to create well-being goals for the year and things like that, and also being able to be measured as to how am I bringing down my score, how am I bringing up my score over time. I just think that's so important to be able, if your organization has the capacity to do that, to look at that by different subsects of the organization, because like Tim mentioned, we do have you know, diversity in terms of function and the way that we operate, especially in the regions. And it's so important to get that granular level of understanding where my problems are, where my areas for opportunity are, for sure.
Yeah, I really like that, equipping managers with the information that they need as well to understand where their team are, so then that can be, that then informs their approach and the areas that they focus on. I think that's so important as well. And how do we, I guess, support managers to look after themselves as well, Iman? Like, have you, within Visa, have you sort of focused specifically on that group, understanding the sort of the pressures that they face, or is it sort of the support and the work that you're doing is sort of catches all different levels of employee?
Yeah, we have a couple of ways that we do that for people leaders. So one is we have a people leader well-being guide, and the way that we have that guide structured is so that people leaders start with themselves. And so how am I taking care of my own well-being? How can I see, speak, support signs of distress in myself, and then learning how to do that in others, and then thinking about that for ourselves in our one-on-ones. How are we role modeling that in our group meetings? How are we doing that? And so thinking about that across the different experiences that we have across the course of the day, not only kind of at this starting with ourselves and then thinking simultaneously, how am I doing that with myself and others kind of in flux? That's really something we try to train our people leaders in. And then that's kind of reinforced, like I said, in the processes we have through the survey. And when those results come, sometimes, with those questions, my manager cares about my well-being. The people business partners will then go and say, okay, if managers don't care about their well-being, what is it that maybe the manager may be struggling with themselves and maybe they need support. We also have care guides for employees, self-care guides, resources that we create. We also have and so I think just to take a step back, like I said, our approach is really around creating resources and tools to empower employees. And what we do is through our ambassadors and anyone who's passionate about well-being, even if they're not formally an ambassador, we give them really bite-sized resources and tools that they can take away to be able to support their team. So if I only have 1 minute, if I have 5 minutes, if I have 10 or more minutes, what can I do to take this bite-sized resources about mental health or about meeting effectiveness and actually loop that into the beginning of a team meeting or do a longer session in an offsite or something like that. And so the thing that's been really powerful about that is that has quite a great ripple effect because we can only do so much on our own. And as we empower ambassadors to share that information more, especially when that comes from senior leaders as the ambassador themselves, then they can cascade that through their entire organization. We're piloting next month, actually really excited about it, a portal where employees can kind of filter by different topics and be able to pull out resources that they can then take and share with their teams. And we have them categorized by, they can be used in an email, they can be used as a Teams message, they can be an activity, and all of the information that they need to actually do that themselves is there. So we're really proud of that.
I love that, Iman, using different ways of communication as well in terms of building these kind of conversations and prompts into everything that we're doing, and having that, if I've got 1 minute, if I've got 5 minutes, I think, we would hope that everybody would have 1 minute in a meeting perhaps to use some of those tools and to kind of be asking people around their well-being, being able to share and this being a regular conversation that we're all having. So that sounds brilliant. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we're going to move on to our audience Q&A. I've got some questions coming through, so I want us to see if we can capture as many of those as possible. Tim and Iman, thank you for sharing so much with us in such a short amount of time. I've definitely learned a lot myself. And a reminder to the audience, we are recording this. We will write up a summary. So, don't worry if you've missed anything or you want to refer back to anything. We will share that with you afterwards. So let me start with a question here from Priya. And Priya says, how can organisations promote work-life balance and flexibility to support mental health without compromising productivity? So when we're thinking around how do we empower our people to sort of develop and manage a work-life balance and how can flexibility to support that? Who would like to jump in first?
I can jump in with some initial thoughts. Yeah, I think it's a great question. This is something that I think a lot of wellbeing practitioners have been sort of wrestling with for a while. And I would probably start with going back to where we're working on this is again integrated to how we work. We talk about ways of working a lot, and we talk about agile working. So we're very fortunate in our organization that agile working and flexibility are really sort of embedded in how we want to design our talent experience for people. And certainly, post-pandemic, we've really, that helped us really shift during that time as well. But I think, there is certainly a lot of, it helps some of the policies, the approaches to talent and how we setting up sort of working patterns, having teams talk about their ways of working, what their preferences are, what responsibility they got. That's something that a lot of our Deloitte firms are doing with teams when they're setting up and working on client engagements. I think that it's the choice, honestly, but it's not just saying, here's the choice, you work it out. I think we go back to empowerment again. People need the permission to be able to adopt those working practices, which takes role modeling. It takes removing those barriers and adjusting those norms. So certainly we're still working on that, but it's I feel really fortunate to work in an organization where actually, you know, flexibility is respected and encouraged, you know, while focusing on what we need to get done. I know what you think, Iman. I mean, that's, you know, it's a starting point.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Tim. And I think, you know, at Visa, we have a flexible working policy. And so that's really around employees being able to work whenever it makes sense for them. I think, you know, sometimes taking a one size fits all approach when you think about flexibility or scheduling an organization doesn't always work. We also have well-being hours. So for part of the year, we have Fridays afternoons where employees are not required to work. And then the rest of the year, we have no meeting afternoons. But then if you think about, you know, employees who are working with different regions, or maybe their Friday is actually a Thursday, maybe they can't always take those well-being hours, especially if they're partnering with external clients or partners. And so the flexible working approach empowers them to actually take that time at a different time and to be empowered to say, hey, even I'm neurodiverse, I focus better, and I have ADHD, I focus better early in the morning and late at night, maybe during the day, if my schedule can permit, and I can shift my schedule that way. My meetings, I can actually work at the times that are best for me, as long as that's aligned with my manager. So I think taking approaches, I see also, you know, just the other questions just around workload and how if someone has so much to do, how can they actually, you know, work flexibly, I think is a question that comes up a lot. And so, you know, when you take a flexible work approach, or if someone has so much to do, how can they take their time for themselves? If you have a flexible working approach, then they can work at the times that are most effective for themselves, and then be able to create more space within their day and to work more effectively and be a lot more balanced. So.
Yeah, thank you both. That's really valuable, and I think that is, I think Suganda's question that you were touching on there, Iman, around actually if teams are under-resourced, if economic conditions are challenging, that they may be for a number of firms, and you're doing many jobs and you've got many hats, you know, this can be a challenge for a number of different roles. Actually, how can you start promoting the concept of well-being? So I think what you've shared there, Iman, is really helpful. And Tim, just wanted to circle back to that to see if you had anything to add on that particular part.
Yeah, this is, I think, you know, the conversation of workload and work hours is always front of mind, honestly. And you know, where we start from is like, you know, it's that empowerment between, you know, the team member and team leader. We need those open conversations. We need to breed that culture where we can talk about the pressures, because I would say it's not just about workload. Sometimes it can be about the level of control you have over your work. It can be the relationships, you know, within, you know, who you're working with. It's a very, you know, the concept of good work is complex, but I really believe it starts with conversations and being always looking at how it can be improved. You know, it's something we're still working on and we're encouraging, you know, us to look at as well. But yeah, it has to start with open and honest dialogue, I would say.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tim. That's great. And we've got a question, actually, Tim for Deloitte, but of course, Iman, do jump in. But the question is, how did you go about taking a baseline to measure against? So you both talked about measuring that. So Iman, please also contribute. But yeah, how did you decide on that baseline? How was that assessed?
I'm so sorry. I'm about to have a fire test in the middle of our webinar, as you might be able to hear. Can we go to the next question? I'll come back to that. Is that all right?
Of course. No problem at all. No problem at all, Tim. So another question here that may, well, maybe these will be our last two questions for time, but Priya's asked, what role does a founder's mental health play in the success of a startup? And I think this relates to any size of organization as well. You know, what role does our managers, our leaders' mental health play in the success of teams or success in organizations? So, Iman, if I can come to you on that one.
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, it's definitely very important. For a founder, but also I think that question can be expanded for a leader in general. So when you're leading a team, the way that you role model yourself and your activity is, and your tone, your demeanor, your comfort with your work, your comfort with your team, that really affects how your team views you, how comfortable they feel around you. Like the question that I alluded to in a survey my manager cares about my well-being, Visa cares about my well-being. Our perception of an organization is largely through our manager and through the leaders that we work with. And that definitely has a ripple effect. I've worked with teams where a leader is visibly very stressed and maybe always sharing what's coming down the pike, what's causing challenges for them, and vocalizing their stress. And so I think a really important practice for leaders and for founders to sit with is really, how am I projecting my stress onto my team? What am I doing in the beginning of each day and throughout the course of each day to make sure that the way that I'm communicating, my demeanor, my tone, my methods of communication are such that I create space for employees to work flexibly, to be able to feel safe around me, and to be able to have peace and calm in their working environment. I have seen teams where the feedback was that, hey, my manager, my leader is communicating via Zoom. They're also communicating via Teams, via email, via WhatsApp, and they're calling me. All in the course of the day. That's a stress reaction that leader had to communicate so much and in so many different mediums. And so I think that for our leaders, it's really important to be reflective of not only our tone and our demeanor, but how we're communicating, the method of communication that we're using, and actually ask those questions proactively when you have a mid-year review, annual review, or even outside of that cycle. I like to ask that question once a month to the team that I work with, for feedback on myself, not just in what could I be doing better to support you, but how is my style of working supporting you. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think for all of us to be aware of how we process stress, how our mental health is, and then the impact that can have on others. And I think that works for all of us, doesn't it? Of course, a founder of a startup is very much setting that culture of a small organization, but we know that leaders and managers across their teams as well, and so it's important for us to support them, to empower them to look after their health, and empower them to look after their people's health as well. We are really drawing to the close of our time together. I wish we had more time to answer some of your questions. We will take them away and ask our lovely panelists to share some of their thoughts, and we will include that in the write-up as well. But a really big thank you, Tim and Iman. Tim, I'm sorry your fire alarm is still going, but thank you for bearing with us. Really appreciate all of your time and your expertise. It's been very encouraging. We know that this is a journey, it's not a quick fix. So to hear your lessons, your challenges, the opportunities that you've shared with us has been incredibly valuable. And I think what really stood out to me is, not trying to do everything at once, and sort of focusing down on one area of confidence, one skill, starting small. And actually that's a really great approach. I think sometimes we can worry we need to do everything at once because we're so passionate about what we're doing. So I really love that. And really, working with different groups within your business, different teams across different territories, different cultures, incredibly important and valuable in making sure this lands and that every person is reached within your organization. And I think really seeing the importance of leaders and managers in role modeling those behaviors. They set the tone for their team. So if we can support them to look after themselves, but if we can support them to prioritize their team's health as well, we know that we're going to be creating a large ripple effect across organizations, whether small as startups or whether large global firms. So really thank you everyone for joining us today. We really value your time, your commitment to this agenda. It's so wonderful to be part of this inspiring global community and learning from one another and sharing and supporting one another. So a really big thank you. When we close the session shortly, we will be shared with a very short survey. If we could take one more minute of your time to complete that really helps us just understand how we can best provide support to you. So thank you in advance, and really lovely to have the opportunity to be together today. So thank you everybody for your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and seeing you all again soon. So thank you so much everyone. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening. Thank you.